Okay. So we're reconvening this meeting. Thank you to everybody who came and spoke in public speaking time. We're now moving on to the report. Oh, we got members' business. We're keeping going with members' business. Do we have any leaves of absence or matters of an urgent nature? Right, now we're on to reports. So we have 7.1 Coastal Advisory Panel Recommendation Report. I'll invite Chris to continue her introduction to this report.
Sure. And I think earlier I mentioned to you that the decisions that we were seeking from you today, which I think the major one that we've put on the table is to receive the report and the work that has been done, and just to acknowledge that that report includes a huge amount of material to read, actually, when you get into the appendices. There are thousands of pages to get across, and I think we really wanted to acknowledge that that is something that you need to take time to digest and understand before we would be asking you to make decisions. And of course, in time, we would be coming back to explore that with you. But today, we wanted to focus on the work that CAP has progressed, the report that we're asking you to receive, and to acknowledge the work of CAP that the council and really a previous triennium had tasked them to undertake, and to also agree that that work is now finished and that we're effectively closing the Te Katoa Kapiti project. So Jason is going to talk in a lot more detail than I just did about what is in front of you, and then we would look, as usual, to take any questions. I'll pass to Jace.
Thanks, Chris.
Kia ora koutou. Thank you to elected members, valued iwi partners, and actually to everyone who took time out of their day to turn up today and listen. And before I get into the report, which is a cover report that attaches, of course, the main star of the show today, the actual CAP report, I did just want to acknowledge the work of the team that supported the panel. And in particular, the staff, many staff have supported it over a period of time. But in the last 18 months, the project has been led by Abby Morris. And I wanted to acknowledge the work that she has done to lead this project. Many people in the back of the room today will have actually engaged with Abby, asked her questions, and I'm sure that you found that she did a great job of being very responsive and supplying you with information. So yeah, just wanted to acknowledge the amazing contribution that Abby has made to this project. Getting into the report itself, this is the council report. You'll note that we have not attempted in this report to analyse the CAPS report, and there's an obvious reason for that, as has been mentioned already. This is a lengthy report, and it does have a lot of underpinning appendices as well. So you'll get the gist from the council report that it's going to take time for advice to come through to council to really get to grips with what is it that the panel has recommended. So while this report doesn't try to provide that analysis, it does pluck out a few key highlights which may be of particular interest to council. So first of all, and starting on page 7, it would be wrong of me not to start by recognising that this whole process has a massive history, and that's been touched on by many of the speakers already. The coastal hazard issue in Kapiti has been a difficult one for quite some time. and the Takatai Kapiti process was an effort to take a different approach than what has been done before. And I recall, I believe it was Ms. Padamsey who may have been the one who mentioned just how difficult things were back in 2012 when council tried to notify a district plan. This has been an effort to respond to what went wrong back then and to do things differently. And it started really, in a way, sort of moving past those difficult times with that process in 2019 and 2020, which was when a group of people got together that weren't just council officers, but also included those who were really deeply involved in those historical events, to try to shape up what should the Takatai Kapiti process look like. And that was the co-design working group. And council made decisions in December 2020 in response to what the co-design working group recommended. That set up Takatai Kapiti. So that was, if you like, the establishment period. And then following that,
So we're now in the main part of the council meeting. We won't be receiving any comments from the public gallery. Thank you. Continue, Jason.
Thank you. And so following that establishment period, there has been a lot of work done by a lot of people, obviously, including the panel itself, who have sat through and had over 20 meetings and workshops. They've received advice from a range of suppliers of expertise, and they have sought community feedback at various points in the process. Turning to pages 8 and 9 of the report, I have just identified a few key points there where the panel has actually seen that issues from the community are particularly significant, and actually goes into page 10 as well. The panel have obviously reflected on what they heard around insurance concerns, and there is an excerpt which is provided actually on page 9 from the panel's report, which is around those insurance concerns. And relating to that part of the report, and indeed that broader issue, there is a recommendation in this council report that council seeks feedback from the Insurance Council of New Zealand regarding the CAPS report and the insurability issue. The other point that is highlighted in particular here, which has been a difficulty that has been brought to the panel's attention through the community feedback process, is around the 100-year perspective that the panel has noted that the NZCPS requires local authorities to take on these issues. And there was another speaker who mentioned that, hey, central government, I think it was actually Dale at the end, central government's got a massive role to play in this issue, and indeed they have. And in fact, on this particular point, we have recommended to council that council follows up with the Department of Conservation, who is the central government department that administers the New Zealand Coastal Policy Statement, to get their views about just how council should approach this 100-year perspective. So I'm not going to get into much more detail than that. You've heard from Chris, who has emphasised the recommendations that are in the report, and I believe, Quinton, when you were speaking, you clearly recognise the difference between receiving and making substantive decisions. This is a report that is asking council to receive the Takatai Kapiti panel's report, and and it would be expected that it would be in the future that it would receive more advice, which really gets into the next steps. I'm going to leave it at that.
Thank you very much, Jason, and thanks for all the work that's gone into this. And while I'm thanking people, I would like to thank Abby as well. Huge amount of work that has gone in, and Lindsay before her as well, and all the staff who've been involved with this over the years. Hasn't been easy, but we are where we are today. I'd also like to thank the panel who, I know in public speaking time it was mentioned that it was rushed, but actually they worked for far longer than they initially thought they were going to have to get this work done. So with that, I'll invite questions. Councillor Cooper.
Hi, thank you. I'll have 4, maybe 5 questions for Jason and Chris, and they're all along a similar vein. And I'm happy for a short, if it requires a yes, I'd be happy if it needs further explanation. I'm happy with that as well. And these questions are really around giving clarity to our ratepayers and our public around next steps, I guess. So my first question, does receiving this report mean that any of the assumptions or recommendations are being validated by council?
No.
Great, thank you. Does accepting this report imply that we're accepting its contents as a matter of fact?
No.
Will the recommendations in this report be implemented prior to coming back to council?
No, we've committed to coming back and working through the document with you and seeking your decisions.
Great. So today the meeting is about tabling the report, receiving it, and not the analysis of the report, which is good. What is the process for staff to bring back to councillors on how the caps or the recommendations are going to be implemented? What does that process look like for us as councillors?
We will be coming back to you with a proposed, I'm going to loosely call it, plan, I'll call it a plan, of the timeframes that we would be unpacking parts of the report and coming back to you. We would like to have a chance to go through that and then come back with some advice, and that would be coming back as we normally do through our normal committee structure.
Awesome, and I think there's a recommendation coming up shortly to vote on, but so just for clarity, we are not intending to implement the recommendations prior to the council laws, elected members having an input into that.
Correct.
Great, thank you.
Right, good questions. Bede.
Just a related question that might or might not have been answered there. So just for clarity, will the recommendations or the report be used to provide advice to councillors?
It's slightly difficult. For us to analyse the report and come back to you, we have to use the report. So if it's outside of us coming back to say, guys, here's what's in the report, this is the recommendation that's on the table, here's some advice about it, make a decision. We're saying to you that we're not taking the recommendations or doing anything with it until we've gone through that process with you. And if you say, for example, accept or reject, we'll be working through what that means from there.
Yep. Okay. So when the advice is given, it will be clear that that advice has come from these recommendations.
Correct.
Yep.
Councillor Pravanov.
Thank you, through the chair. My question is along a similar sort of line. So in paragraph 19, it states it's going to be shared with the Insurance Council. I am interested to know, well, I suppose it's a case of where, so we have this report and that potentially can be looked at in isolation. To me, that is dangerous because, you know, that this report has only been received by this council, not actually accepted. And so I'm really interested to know when it's shared with the likes of the Insurance Council, as well as other parties, that they are very clear as to what we've potentially done with this report, that we've actually received it rather than, potentially received it rather than accepted it.
I'm happy to clarify that. We will obviously, on receipt of the report, be putting it on our website. We'll be ensuring that we're clear around the resolution that's made today. And we had previously had some conversations with some people who presented in public speaking time today, that we were working through what we would ensure was on that page. So you know that we obviously had the first two JACAS reports, for example, and an addendum, and we'd written to the Ministry for the Environment and Department of Conservation, and there's been some concerns around some uncertainty and other things. We wanted to ensure that we're really clear about those points for people. So we're looking at how we can acknowledge some of the concerns that have been raised and note that we're still working through that. So we wanted to have that complete picture on the page where you can see the report. And as others have rightly noted, and with some page references, the CAP report itself actually notes points of uncertainty. So, you know, that's quite in line with, I think, what you're receiving. So we're wanting to make sure that is very clear. And if anybody at any time has any concerns that we haven't reflected that as well as we could, we're happy to take feedback on that.
Thank you, Chris.
Great, I'm not seeing any other questions. Councillor Wilson?
I just follow on from that. One of the things about, again, going to the points that Glenn's made about spelling out really clear where our position is. As far as the insurance is concerned, we heard from Shelley, her insurance has gone up 18.6%. That was ahead of this. So the insurance companies have been gouging the people of Kapiti for many years, including this council, I might say. So I'm not quite sure it's going to make a massive difference with that. But again, in terms of sending a message to insurance companies, to that industry, that this is in no way a license for them to continue the plundering. It doesn't need an answer.
Oh, I was just going to note, and I should have in terms of the last question, when we are seeking feedback from the Insurance Council, we are proposing to invite them to come and speak here, so that they can share to you where their position is. So it isn't just through letters that we're saying things. We'd like to bring them here and share the context that we're in and the concerns that are on the table, so that it can be a very open and transparent conversation.
You might want to lock me up for that one.
Did you hear that?
Councillor Cofen.
Yes. Oh, thanks. Now, in the meantime, will we be looking at other reports and models to increase our understanding of this problem, like the Ian Harrison economic report?
You've given the example of Ian Harrison. I can just share with councillors that we are going to be meeting with Ian. That's already in train, because he'd already given us some early feedback which we were interested in, and so we're following up in the background in a conversation where we were already. So we have said and remain in the position that yes, of course we're interested in different information and perspectives, and as we give further advice to you and take next steps in different places, you would expect us to be open to that, and we are. So I can confirm that too.
Great. Anybody else got any questions before I ask for somebody to move the recommendations? Right. So we have some recommendations starting on page 6 of council agendas, and we've also had an extra one just to nail down where we're at in the process. So I'll get the recommendations with the additional recommendation. Yeah, so this recommendation E really just draws out paragraph 23 of the report, which talks about where where we're going to go from here in terms of further analysis of the report, just to provide some of that information up front. So do I have somebody who's willing to move those recommendations? Moved by Councillor Wilson, seconder Councillor Coford. Right of introduction. Waived. Anybody else want to say anything about these recommendations? Councillor Cooper.
Yes, I just wanted to say that that E is a late inclusion, and I think that for me gives a really clear steer to our ratepayers and our public that this will actually get full consideration by your elected members, and that this isn't receiving this report gives us actually the ability to make some really good decisions on it, good governance decisions in the future. And I think that's a good thing. We've had assurances from staff that the recommendations won't be implemented until that happens, and this, I think that E codifies that those sentiments in that statement. And I think that's a good thing, and I having spoken to some of the elected members around the table, they 100% agree with that sentiment, and will give any thought to the recommendations their absolute best clarity. So I think that's a good inclusion, E.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Cooper. Councillor Spires, I think is next. Oh, Councillor Halliday, sorry. Councillor Spires.
I just wanted to echo
Sorry, Martin.
Cooper's comments, because I was going to note that because I will support the thank you for E, because even though I do not support climate change, I will support the recommendations at this point in time because it's not making a decision. So thank you for E.
Great. Councillor Halliday.
Yes, thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Look, that's more of a statement than anything else. Look, is there one truth here? No, there's not. This is an evolving situation, conversation, or process, and it's going to be ongoing and ongoing and ongoing. This report, while being a settlement requirement, is also a source of information. I dare say a very informed source of information. Members of our community put forward information as well, and I respect constructive input. Another source is community meetings, sometimes a challenging environment, but important places to hear a point of view. We're told to keep an open mind, not an empty mind. And I, for one, do what I can to build my knowledge and understandings from different sources for a more rounded and informed position with regards to my decision-making process representing my community. Now, I'll be supporting the receiving of this report for the information that it contains and in respect for those that have contributed and worked on the content that we are receiving. I also want to acknowledge the very challenging environment that our council officers have had to contend with through this process as well. I think it's important to acknowledge that. That's me. Thank you.
Councillor Kirby.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to say thank you to our public for turning up today and expressing their opinions. I think it's important that we as council engage with our community and hear what they've got to say. And so I think your voice is heard, particularly in that we are receiving this today, not accepting it, not acting on it, doing nothing other than receiving it, and with E in terms of those recommendations of making it clear that there is a process that we'll be following before anything's acted on, of which we expect to hear your voice continuing. So, so thank you again to our public.
Bede, Mr. Larrissy.
Okay, how much time am I allowed?
According to standing orders, 3 minutes or 5 minutes.
All right, I don't think I'll use
Plenty
it all
time.
anyway. I was just curious. It's been a while since I really did much speaking at this table. But the end of a thing is always a useful time to reflect on a thing. And my highest qualification is a historian, so I can't help but look at the past. I was always aware that this issue was going to be one of the biggest that, as Raumati, as a community, we were going to be facing. Prior to the meeting at the bowling club on the 29th of July last year, we invited council to come and speak to the community board about this issue. We had a good crowd, and Jason Holland fronted that meeting. And I have to acknowledge, Jason, your outstanding conduct and response at that meeting. Few people could have dealt with it the way that you did. You're an absolute trooper, and I want to publicly acknowledge what you achieved and what was very trying circumstances. The next event, of course, was the bowling club itself, and I'm going to acknowledge this publicly because it needs to be, because the chair of CAP at that meeting publicly intimidated a member of my community, and I want to acknowledge the harm that was done in that action, and I'm going to say that I will never accept that what happened was acceptable, and I will never condone it, and I'm disappointed that this council did. My focus on this issue has never been the issue itself, but democracy. So my approach, and I have been asked about this a number of times by people, oh, you take this view or that view on this issue. That's not the point. The point to me is that whatever the truth is about this issue, that our people, the members of our community, have the ability to speak, to raise their views, and to have the conversations that they need to. And I really want to publicly thank CALM for stepping up and being the voice for the community in this issue. Whether I agree with you or not, CALM, as you well know, whatever I think of your views, I totally support your right to speak publicly, and I am proud that we gave you the position and the space for you to say what you needed to say. We wrestled with this issue big time in this community, and that came at a cost for a number of people. And that's okay, that's how it goes. We need to do more of that, not less of that. And I think that the biggest learning for this council coming out of this process should be how we need to do democracy better. Because if people in this community are going to stand up and say their view, we need to respect it and not look for ways to shut it down. And I have seen attempts to shut down the dialogue, and that's been disappointing. Tanya, Isabel, Shelley, you all thank the Raumati Community Board today, and thank you for that acknowledgement. Unlike CAP, who never mentioned our efforts once in their report, but I won't take it personally. Some of the members have thanked me individually. I am grateful for CAP's work. They've done outstanding work over the last little while. I have thanked them publicly already, but again on the record, thank you for the work that you've done. It's been phenomenal. Again, whether I agree with your recommendations or not, the work that you've done, that you were willing to come down to our community board and engage. And as far as I'm aware, we're still the only forum down at Raumati Community Board that have had council, community board, CAP, CALM and crew all actually talking to each other constructively in the same room. I'm really proud of that. And if someone were to have a code of conduct against me and kick me out of council today, that would be my proudest moment. Maybe that in the vision, I'm not sure. But thank you to staff for the support that you've provided through this. That has been hard, and I appreciate that it's been really hard. Sometimes you don't agree with things that are happening, but you need to support them, and that's okay. Really appreciate the efforts that staff have put into all of this. In terms of the recommendations itself, just want to acknowledge that CAP have included all of the TAG identified pathways in their report. Our expectations were that they were going to only note the 3, but they've actually included all of them, and I think that's a really notable inclusion and a wise inclusion. So thank you for that inclusion. Certainly there's more conversations to have about the priorities there. And of course, as we all know, this is the start of something, not the end of something. So look forward to more conversations, however hard they may be. Thank you.
Thank you, Bede. That's one of the positive things about having community board members and chairs able to speak at the council table, is you hear those different perspectives and those different points of view. So thank you for your thoughts today. For my part, I thank you for being able to hold a positive meeting about this subject. Not all meetings in the community have been so positive, and I just want to say that this council never condones disrespectful or abusive behaviour. Having said that, it's good to get to the end of this piece of work and receive this report today. It's the culmination of a lot of effort and also a lot of angst in the community, and I want to acknowledge that and say that we have learnt from this in terms of how we engage with the community, how we communicate with the community. I think this has been quite challenging because it's been going over such a long period of time. And also, as one of the public speakers said, comes on the back of some other work around coastal hazards, which wasn't entirely positive. But let's receive this report, take a breath, and move forward positively. I was really encouraged to hear the public speakers today who want to still engage, who want to have this conversation and want to move this work forward in a positive way. So let's do that. Right of reply.
Yes, I will exercise my right of reply. So I say this has obviously been going for years, and there's a huge amount at stake for people. And what happens is the higher the stakes, the more intense everybody becomes. If you think that your house, which is for most people is their largest asset, is at risk, or the diminishment of its value or whatever. So I understand the stakes are incredibly high. Passions get roused in these situations. So no, I want to acknowledge that and the intensity of feeling that people have had. I'd also I acknowledge you, Janet, fronting up to the CALM meeting. I went to that one at Southwoods as well, and standing up on stage and speaking required a degree of bravery that not everybody has. So I thought that, and you got out alive, which was fabulous. But also, I'll acknowledge also Tania and her group for making sure that there was another side of an argument was presented. And arguments are always better when there is a counter argument. And it's out of all of that heat that you get some light. I also just wanted to acknowledge Glenn. I think in terms of a really good example of excellent governance, which I think is what we've got in the end here, is that Glenn has just ensured that this process has become really transparent about the where to from now. And given the degree of public angst around this, it's really important that the public are made transparently aware of the process from here. And I think that's done that. So thank you, Glenn. And just finally, I'll just say I think the process has been really respectful today. We've heard from people again who are very passionate about this. It means a lot to them. It means a lot to the future of our district. This is one of the big ones, right? And so the fact that we are going to take this in a considered way is again, that is a really good example of good governance. And I would hope that the dialogue going forward involves the people who might not necessarily be on the same page, but it's really important that we continue dialogue with all of the parties who want to continue talking with us. And as long as we do that, in the end, we'll get there.
Thank you. So I'll now put this to the vote. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? That's carried. Thank you very much. So we move now on to confirmation of minutes, item 8. We have 2 lots of minutes to consider, 23rd of May and 30th of May. Moved by Councillor Kirby, seconded by Councillor Councillor Wilson, all in favour? Aye. Against? That's carried. We'll now take a few minutes so that those in the public gallery can carry on with their days, and then we'll be carrying on with the meeting. Thank you. Thanks for your attendance and your contributions.